Hi, 703, it's Miss English with a review of the Unit 5 cumulative exam that you took last week. The average score was about 55, so we have a lot of work to do between now and May 1st when you'll take your state exam. So jumping right in, this is question number 1. It says the initial balance of a savings account is $275. And then it says, after which transactions will the balance of the savings account be the same? That means that basically whatever you do to this account, if you started with $275, you're going to end with $275. Anytime you have this type of problem, you have to go through each transaction one by one and eliminate them as you go. So answer A says you take out $232, then you deposit $132. Well, no, that's not going to leave it unchanged. The next question says, or the next possible answer is a deposit of $276 followed by a withdrawal. That means I add $276, and then I take away $278. That will turn into 0. Therefore, the correct answer in this is B. You can try the other two, but you can see that they both leave it with a different answer, or basically with a change in the balance. Question number 2 was a little tricky to understand. Let's see if I can have you see this question better. It basically says you have to know a little bit about sea level and zero and positive grades. So it says altitude above sea level given in positive values and below sea level is given in negative values. So if you draw yourself a little map, you say, well, this is sea level. So at sea level, I am at 0. So above sea level is going to be positive. Below sea level is negative. So once again, I need to go through each one of the potential answer choices to see which one is correct and which one I can eliminate. So answer choice A, scoot this over. Answer choice A says, the hiker started at -10 and then increases by 10. Well, let's see, if they start at -10 and they increase by 10, then they are at sea level. And I have to go back to the question and say, well, which situation describes a hiker in Death Valley? You have to know that Death Valley is below sea level. But he's down here and below Death Valley, and he stops at an altitude of 0. So if he starts at -10 and he goes up 10 feet, he is obviously now at sea level. So I'm going to go ahead and say answer A is the correct answer. But I'm going to read the other ones just to be sure. Anytime you get the first one as the correct one, double check the rest. He starts at -10 and then he goes down 10. Nope, he'd be at -20. He starts at +10. That means that he would be above sea level and then decreases by 10. Increases, so he'd be in this case he would be at -20. At this case, he would be at +20. And the last one, he starts at 0 feet and then decreases. No, he would be at -10. So the correct answer for number 2 is A. Moving on to number 3, which expression is equivalent to 4 minus a -7? Well, we know when we subtract a negative, we add a positive. So this is basically going to be 4 plus 7. Look at my answer choices. This is 7 plus 4, which is the same thing, so I'm going to say it's A, but I double check my others to be sure. 4 minus 7, no. -7 minus 4, no. -4 plus 7, no. The correct answer choice for 3 is A. Yesterday, the temperature at noon was at 11.4 degrees Fahrenheit. By midnight, the temperature had decreased. So I know the temperature went down, so I'm going to subtract 15 degrees. So if I subtract 11.4 from 15.7, I get -4.3. You can do that in your calculator. The correct answer choice is A. So reviewing, we had for B, number 1 is B, number 2 is A, number 3 is A, number 4 is also A. Okay, turning the page. And I can see this is going to be hard to read because my pen went through. I apologize for that, but let's see what we can do. So the value, if you can read on your paper, what is the value of the expression below? And in this case, I just need to do from left to right. I subtract, I have negative 0.75 minus a positive 2/5 plus 0.4 plus a negative 3/4. So the easiest thing to do really is just rewrite that. So if I rewrite it, and I'm going to rewrite these all in decimals. You can rewrite them all in I'm rewriting them in fractions. So I have negative 3/4 plus 2/5 plus 0.4 is 4/10 plus a negative 3/4. So I have just rewritten that problem, putting them all into fractions so they're easier for me to consolidate. So I can see that I have negative 3/4 here, negative 3/4 here. So let's combine this to negative 6/4. So I've gotten rid of this one, I've gotten rid of this one, and I'm left with 2/5 and 4/10. I notice if I reduce 4/10, 4/10 is actually the same thing as 2/10. 2 into 2, this is 2, I'm sorry, this is 2/5. So I have 2/5 plus 2/5 is 4/5. So when I consolidate these two, I'm just left with 6/4 plus 4/5. So let's add those two together on a separate sheet. So recall we have negative 6/4, and I'm adding 4/5. When I add two fractions that have different denominators, I need to find the lowest common denominator, which is 20. In order to get from 4 to 20, I multiply this side of the equation by 5/5. To get from 5 to 20, I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 4/4. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. 4 times 4 is 16. So then I'm simply going to add negative 30 to positive 16. And my denominator will stay the same at 20. So if it were 15, that would be 15, but it's one bigger. So I'm going to have negative 14. Negative 14 over 20, I know I can reduce that. 2 goes into 14, negative 7/10. Then I look over at my answer choices, and I can see that I have, there's no negative 7/10, but I know that 7 over 10 is the same thing as 0.7. My answer is negative. The correct answer in this case is B. Okay, for number 6, we have a similar situation of adding and subtracting. Remember, for number 6, you are going to have to use PEMDAS. Remember, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So I look at my problem and I see, let me rewrite it, negative 8/9 divided by negative 2/3 times negative 4 1/2. I'm going to change negative 4 1/2 to a mixed number. 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9, so this is now times negative 9/2. So let's see if we can see that whole problem again. Negative 8/9 divided by negative 2/3 times negative 9/2. So my PEMDAS tells me the first thing that I do, I don't have any parentheses, I don't have any exponents, so I know that I have to multiply first. So when I multiply, I'm going to multiply negative 2/3 times negative 9/2. So when I multiply across, I know that I can simplify. This turns into negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6/2. I know that 6/2 is equal to 3. So moving down, I now have negative 8/9 divided by 3. So when I divide a fraction, I'm going to divide it by 3/1. Just make sure you have that written out correctly. Remember, when I'm dividing a fraction by a fraction, I'm removing the reciprocal by multiplying by the reciprocal. 3/1 times 1/3. I do the same thing to the top, times 1/3. This cancels, and I'm left with negative 8/9 times 1/3, the reciprocal, and I end up with negative 8/27. I look over in my answer choices and make sure that I have that as a choice, and sure enough, there is one that's negative and there's one that's positive, but remember this first one was negative, so my final answer is going to be negative 8/27, or B. Number 7. Again, some of these really tricky looking additions. So if you look at this, I'm going to use my PEMDAS again. There's nothing to multiply. So rewriting this, I have 3/8 plus a negative 4/5 plus a negative 3/8 plus 5/4. So I look at that whole thing, and I see, like, well, look, 3/8 minus 3/8, that's easy. These two things simply cancel out. So all of a sudden my equation got a lot easier, and I'm adding negative 4/5 plus 5/4. Once again, I need a common denominator, and this is 20. Multiply the left side by 4, so I have negative 16. Multiply the right side by 5. I have positive 25. Negative 16 plus positive 25 is going to be, let's see, you can use your calculator, but if I added 10, I would have 26, so I'm going to have to add 9. So I have 9/20. It's positive because the 16 is smaller than the 25. I check my answer choices, and sure enough, 9/20 is answer choice C for number 7. Turning the page, and I'll try not to write with my dark pen. And this says a vehicle uses 1 1/5 gallons of gasoline to travel 13 1/2 miles. At this rate, how many miles can the vehicle travel per gallon of gasoline? So I'm going to make a simple ratio. Basically, what I want to know is miles per gallon, the MPG of this car. So if I'm traveling 13 1/2 miles, 13 1/2, I'm going to turn that into a mixed, it's a mixed number. I'm going to turn it into an improper fraction. 2 times 13 is 26, plus 1 is 27/2. And I'm going to divide it by 1 1/8. 1 1/8 turned into a mixed number. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 9/8. So I have a stacked fraction that I'm going to divide. Remember, when we divide, we multiply by its reciprocal. The reciprocal of 9/8 is just 8/9. That will turn this into 1. Multiply the top by 8/9. And I can make my fractions simpler by cross-simplifying. 2 goes into 2 one time, 4 times, 1 time, 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 1 is 1. 12 divided by 1 is simply 12. My correct answer is 12. And that is answer choice C for 8. Moving on to 9. A recycling plant processes an average of 1/3 of ton of glass each minute. So I need to know that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, and there are 24 hours in 1 day. So it's asking at approximately what rate does the recycling plant process a ton per day, knowing there are 60 minutes in an hour and 24 hours in a day. So I take my 1/3 ton of glass, I multiply by 60, so that means this is how much I have per hour, and I multiply by the hours per day. So I have 1/3 times 60 times 24, and I can do a little cross simplification before I multiply. 3 goes into 3 one time, 20 times, so I'm left with 20 times 24. 20 times 24 happens to equal 480, and the correct answer for 9 is C. Moving on. Straighten up my work area here. And this one caught a lot of you by surprise, and you all know how to do it. So let's just make sure we remember a few things. First of all, I know that to find the area, I multiply the length times the width. We did that in practice yesterday. So if they tell me they want to know if they're putting wallpaper on this room, they're covering the whole room with wallpaper, and they want to know how much that's going to cost. So if it's 42 feet by 25.5 feet, then I'm going to multiply those things together to find the area. The area happens to equal 1,071. And then it tells me that the cost per square foot is $771. So I'm going to do my price over the quantity that I use. Remember your P's and Q's. I'm going to divide 771.12 by 1071, and my answer is 72 cents. So I look over at my answer choices. And sure enough, oh, if I round, it's actually going to be 72. Oh, don't need to round. It's 72 cents. The correct answer choice for number 10 is B. Moving on to 11. We have a very nice model here. It's a graph, and it asks me quite simply the cost between the weight and the total cost. And they're selling sliced turkey. Not sure why they would use sliced turkey, but that question is pretty simple. 2 points R is right here, so this is point R. This is point W down here. The total cost between the 2 points is labeled on the graph below. And the question asks, what statement is true? Point R, we have to go through one by one. Point R means that the unit rate is 10. Well, no, remember that the unit rate is for 1 unit. So I look down here for 1 unit on my graph. It's right here, 1. For 1 unit by weight, I will pay $2. Actually, it's a little bit over that. It's a little higher. So 1 unit is 2.5. So I can cross out R. The unit rate is 4, and I'm left with C. Point W means that the unit rate is $2.50 per pound. The correct answer for 11 is C. Question 12 is the amount of fabric that I have. excuse me here, the amount of fabric that I have. On the x-axis, I have the orange fabric. On the y-axis, I have the blue fabric. And it says basically, what is the constant of proportionality as shown on the graph? Remember, the constant of proportionality is the slope. So in order to find the slope on this graph, I'm just going to find two what we call friendly points. That means points where they fall right exactly onto a line. So on my particular case, I have found that the closest one appears to be with 0.4 and 0.9. Remember, in this case, it's always my y1 minus my y2 divided by my x1 minus my x2. My 2 points that seem to make the most sense to me is the 0.4, and it's divided by 0.9. 0.4 divided by 0.4 by 0.9 is approximately D, or 1/2. The short answers I'm actually going to do on a separate tape, because as you can see, this tape is becoming very long. So let's skip right over this and move on to question 13.